Coming up next, an interview that really surprised me. Now, sometimes I do an interview and I think I know exactly what to expect, and then it all goes out the window. And I hear a story that truly blows me away. Today's multi-platinum artist hit the jackpot in 1977 and 1978. 4 big hits in a row. Soon after, she had another big hit. She was chosen to sing the James Bond theme. All 5 of these big hits were written by other people. But according to her, she wrote a song that was stolen from her because she was heard, she played it in front of this artist, this legend, and the stolen song became one of the biggest songs ever. Story in the interview, really interesting story, is coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember being traumatized by the Wheelers in Return to Oz, or that big dog in the Never-Ending Story, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the red button and click the notification bell so you always know when our stuff's coming out. Also, check out our merch and our Patreon that helps us keep it a daily channel. So it's time for another edition of our series Revelations, where artists give us exclusive behind-the-scenes experiences about their biggest songs and their biggest albums. Insight you truly won't find anywhere else. Wow, we've got quite an interview for you today. Now, Rita Coolidge had 5 big solo hits after being discovered by Delaney and Bonnie, starting off as a backup singer for the likes of Joe Cocker, Harry Chapin, Bob Dylan, Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Dave Mason, Graham Nash, Stephen Stills, and Leon Russell. In fact, it was Leon Russell who wrote the song about her and gave her the nickname the Delta Lady. Delta Lady. She's actually famous for not getting credit for several high-profile hit songs, starting with Superstar. Don't you remember you told me you loved me, baby? Then there's Layla. With Layla, which she'll talk about, she recorded a demo with her boyfriend, Derek and the Dominoes drummer Jim Gordon. She actually played the piano coda in front of Eric Clapton, who was really impressed, and he ended up using it, but he never gave her credit. She tried to contact him when she heard it on a PA system a year later when it became a huge hit. And, well, I'll let her tell you. Now, she had some huge hits starting in 1977, including the #2 smash, Your Love Has Lifted Me Higher and Higher, originally written by Gary Jackson, Raynard Minor, and Carl Smith, and a big hit for Jackie Wilson. And then We're All Alone, another top 10 hit that was written by Boz Scaggs. Close the window, come alive. She had a big hit several years after that with the James Bond theme, All Time High, written by John Barry and Tim Rice for the film Octopussy. We're an all-time high. She was actually chosen by famous Bond producer Cubby Broccoli. It was because his daughter was a big fan and convinced him to choose her. Octopussy is actually one of the few Bond themes not named after the film. Understandable, although I think a song called Octopussy would be just interesting enough to drive radio play. We'll take on the world and win. Here's a very interesting interview with the Delta Lady. Here it is. Yeah, I was talking to Bobby Whitlock a couple of years ago about, Derek and the Dominoes and talking about Layla. And he was telling me about, of course, Time. And Priscilla actually recorded it with Booker T.
There was an upstairs of John Garfield's house and a downstairs, and I had the upstairs part, which had originally been his bedroom and his study. And they'd added a small kitchen and bath. That may have been there. But so I lived upstairs, and there was a stairway that went down. Bobby Whitlock lived downstairs. So he was always up and down the stairs and, without knocking sometimes because we were good friends. And a bunch of other people lived down there because it was, the 70s. Everybody loved.
Love. Oh, yeah.
So Bobby would hear me playing the piano sometimes, and he would just come up and say what's going on. And at that time, Jim Gordon and I were dating, and came over one day, and as he was coming up the stairs and down the sidewalk, he heard me playing this piano part. He came in and sat down and said, that's really beautiful. And I said, do you want to write a song? And he said, yeah. So, I played that, the coda, and then we started writing this song, Time. We've got a million years to show them. So we made a little demo with a cassette, and when we got into the studio a couple of months later, I sat down at the piano during a break between takes of songs and played the song for Eric, and he liked it and left the cassette on the piano and felt that nothing had happened with it. Immediately following that, they formed Derek and the Dominoes, and Jim Gordon, Carl Radel, and Bobby Whitlock, who were in Delaney and Bonnie's band, became the Dominoes. And I was at A&M one day having my picture made from following the release of my first record, and I hear this music come over the PA system in the studio, and I'm like, wait a minute. I recognize this music. I know this music. They're like, yeah, you don't know it. It's a brand new Eric Clapton record. I said, it's my music. And they took pictures of the veins popping out in my neck. I was so upset. So I ran out of the studio and went to Tower Records and picked up the record to see if I had gotten any credit. And of course I didn't. And I started trying to get in touch with Eric through Robert Stigwood, who was his manager at the time, and he was just a mogul. And I got him finally on the phone, and I said, I'm one of the writers, that's my music. And he said, yeah, what are you gonna do about it? He said, you're a girl. You don't have the money to fight this, let it go.
Wow.
And that was it. And I went back to A&M, to my record company, and they said, this record company doesn't have the money to fight Robert Stigwood. His pockets were way deep. And so the only thing I can do is just tell my story. Bobby backs it up. Bobby knows. He was there.
Well, if you go on YouTube, and you can hear the song Time, which was recorded by Priscilla and, of course, Booker T, and it's a beautiful song. It's cool to hear, vocals over it, because you're so used to hearing that song, that great coda, but it really fits with words.
I thought so too.
Yeah, and it's just sad, but luckily we're entering into a new phase in this world where you can't say, well, you're a girl, what are you going to do about it, kind of thing.
That's right.
One of the most beautiful piano codas ever. I mean,
thank you.
Just amazing. That's my favorite part of the song.
Experiences like that, when people treat you badly, you can either buy into that and become a victim, or you can let it be a life lesson. And I just choose to not look over my shoulder at all in my life.
Yeah.
Except the good things. I like to remember the good times.
1977, I mean, you could never have been prepared for the success of this album. I mean, this Anytime, Anywhere, #6 on the pop charts, and so many songs. This was back before they would take 2 and 3 and 4 singles from an album. An album would come out, maybe you'd have 1 or 2 singles, but this had, 3 very successful singles, starting with one of the best cover songs of all time, Your Love Keeps Lifting Me Higher and Higher. But that was #2 on the pop charts. Of course, written for Jackie Wilson back in the day, Gary Jackson and Carl Smith. I want to mention that it was kept off #1 by the Eagles, Best of My Love, on the Billboard charts, but it hit #1 on the Cashbox charts. What made you want to record that?
So I had done all my first albums with David Anderle, and David at some point said, you know, what do you think about bringing Booker in to co-produce the next record? I said, I think it'd be great. He was married to my sister. We had a great relationship. We were family. I had sung on a record that Booker had recorded, or had done an album for Epic Records that was never released. And he had done this arrangement of Higher and Higher. You can tell the organ in the beginning is Booker, but it was just so laid back and kind of mellow, you know, so different from Jackie Wilson's kind of up-tempo. I said, Booker, whatever happened with your cut of Higher and Higher? And he said, well, not anything. They never released the record. I said, can we do the arrangement on this record? He's like, absolutely. And I said, do you have it? He said, in my brain. Booker he's one of those people that literally hears music all the time. There's not a minute of his life where music is not playing in his brain. So he just pulled it out, and that was the magic of that record. I think when I heard Booker do it with a similar arrangement, I just went, that's such a huge hit.
It actually outdid the Jackie Wilson one as far as chart position goes, because Jackie Wilson's went to number 6 and you, of course, went to number 2. So that's what an honor there. But why the change on the title? I'm just curious. Yours was just a little bit different.
For me, it was just Higher and Higher. The other stuff didn't matter. That all came from whoever was doing credits and titles and all of that. That's business. I'm the artist.
You and your sister Priscilla, like you said, had sung it, and background in the version, the Booker T version. Is that version around somewhere?
I don't think so, because they never released it.
Yeah.
Booker may have it in his archives.
The Higher and Higher was making its way up the chart, higher and higher. What were you thinking at that moment?
When the album was released and the first single came out, I had just lost a child. And it was a really devastating time for me. And Chris had been on the road, and he was there with me for a little while, but I pretty much was at home by myself with my 3-year-old and having just lost this baby. And I think that the record was something that just, having the 3-year-old and having the success of the record, it kind of forced me to keep my head above water and to keep going and to not dwell on this tragedy that had happened in my life. So, you know, I was standing in the kitchen one day, and James Taylor, I think it was Handyman, came on the radio, and I love James Taylor. I've always been such a fan. And following that, they played, and they started talking about this new hit and this big hit, and Rita Coolidge, and I was like, really? You know, I was washing dishes, going, Casey, come here. It was humbling. And I remember thinking, I'm so happy that this has happened, because A&M has been such a great record company, and they've stuck with me and allowed me to do what I wanted to do, and that finally I brought something home for them.
Well, and of course, that set up so perfectly for the next song that was released, which is the standard. I mean, it's become a 70s standard.
We're all alone.
We're All Alone, which of course went to number 7 on the pop charts, but the number 1 hit on the AC charts, and worldwide did so well. Number 6 in the UK and Ireland, and just number 1 in Canada, AC, you know, just such a big song, and it's still a song that you hear all the time on radio. Even hit the country chart, right? So it was one of those songs that just went across the charts. Tell me about that song, about We're All Alone.
When we were gathering material for this record, and I think, you know, at that time, A&M was unique in the fact that Jerry Moss and Herb Alpert were record company owners and executives that were just always available to the artist, and and always had ideas, creative ideas. You would expect that from her because he's a musician, but Jerry had the same kind of ears. And I was down at the lot one day, and somebody came down and said, Jerry wants to see you in your office when you're finished with this meeting. And so I walked into Jerry's office, and he said, Boz Scaggs has this album, Silk Degrees, and I'm sure you have it, and I'd almost worn it out. He said, there's a song on there that's not going to be a single, but it's in more than 1 million homes now, and it needs to be sung by a woman. And Jerry thought that way. There's a kind of an interpretation from a song when a man sings it, and then when a woman sings it, it has a whole different appeal, and it just makes it better. Well, it makes it different. It reaches out to women who are having those same feelings. And so he, put the record on and played We're All Alone. And he said, I really think you should do this. I think it's going to be a big one. I went right up to David Anderley's office and told him, and he said, we're doing it.
Wow.
And we did it in the same key that Boz did it in. You can even kind of put them on together.
Outside the rain begins, and it may never end, so cry no more.
But an unforgettable vocal. I mean, I love your voice fits so well with the song, and what I love about your vocal overall, but also particularly on that song, is that you can belt it out, but it doesn't sound like a belt. It sounds so beautiful and subtle, but still has that power to it. And there's not many voices that can do that.
Well, my sister used to say, how do you hold back like that? And I go, I'm shooting my entire wad here, Priscilla.
Close the window, come alive.
What does the song mean to you now? Because it's, like I said, it's become such a standard. It's still played on radio all the time. And I would also add this, a song. There's only a few of these types of songs. If I just think of the song, it's in my head. I don't even have to hear it. It's in my head for days.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's good. But what does the song mean to you now?
What it means to me is what I see in the faces of the audience when I sing it, because the song means so much to so many people.
Close the window, come alive.
Such a positive lyric, and I think there's just something about singing songs that lift people, lift their hearts, and say positive things and aren't about heartbreak and tragedy all the time. I think people just want to relate and be happy.
To the wind, my love.
Then in '83, you're given the amazing honor of being able to sing a James Bond theme, which, I mean, that's something that only a few people have been able to do in their careers. And that all-time high, of course, went to #1, another #1 hit for you.
All I wanted was a sweet distraction for an hour.
Of course, from the James Bond movie Octopussy, from Roger Moore playing James Bond.
Ian Fleming's James Bond 007 in Octopussy.
That was one that John Barry, he came back to the James Bond fold after Missing for Your Eyes Only. And he had to use a different lyricist because he was always using Don Black, and then he started using Tim Rice. And I know that you have said in interviews that you felt like the song was a bit incomplete. Tell me about what you remember about that opportunity coming to you.
It was thrilling. James Bond films have always just, everybody, especially at that time, just waiting for the James Bond films to be released, and the lines would be around the block for the first show.
How it always goes with love when you don't look.
I got a phone call from the record company, and they said, you have been chosen to sing the next James Bond's theme song. And I was like, really? Well, when do I get to hear it? They said, well, it's not written yet. When I got to England and had dinner with John Barry and his wife, and he's just such a lovely man, just wonderful. And so we go to the studio the next day, and the song's still not finished.
Wow.
And Tim Rice came in shortly after we did, and it was like, we need lyrics. And he's, yeah, I'm not finished. And so he goes over and sits down in the corner, and and literally with a scratch pad gets enough lyrics down for us to get the record done. But I, as a songwriter, I don't write like that. I mean, there are some times if I'm collaborating with someone, we might pull something together in a shorter length of time, but then you always want to think about the lyrics and always change things. I mean, I'm not Leonard Cohen. I don't spend a year on a song, but certainly not go and sit in the corner for a James Bond theme song. I just felt like it was kind of disrespectful to the process, to Cubby Broccoli, and certainly to John Barry. I just felt like it was not finished.
Well, Cubby Broccoli, which, speaking of him, this was something that was meant to be because his daughter, Barbara, was a big fan. Because what I had always understood is they were looking at a few different singers. His daughter was such a fan of your music. Tell me about that.
Music sometimes is the last thing considered in a movie, or at least it was at that time. Barbara had, throughout the making of the film, when Cubby would be home at night, she would put on my records, and Cubby said, "Okay, who's that voice? That's who we want. That's who I want for the film." And she's like, "I did it."
We're an all-time high.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Rita Coolidge, All-Time High, and We're All Alone, and the story of just so many interesting stories from her. Just a wonderful human being. I love the interview. Let's have a great discussion about her. Do you remember these songs? What are your memories of these songs? Because these go back to the late 70s, early 80s. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We would love to have you as part of our community. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.